Oh, okay. Looks like I'm already going live. Okay, so wait, this is not the one I wanted. Oh, okay. Now I saw this live yesterday, and I don't know. I had some things I wanted to say about it.
I mean, sure, you can say I was rage baiting.
I didn't know that you were saying that Xander had financial trouble.
Can you become a little bit racist if an ethnic minority is annoying enough?
This is the most pointless discourse we've engaged in.
Do you know how many stupid trans people there are? Do you know how many trans people there
Karl
are?
Max compared Theyfab to saying the N-word in this conversation.
It's interesting how you're deflecting. Why are you deflecting?
No,
right
this
now?
is the problem,
Where's
you
this
gaslighting piece of shit. You keep exaggerating your points on Twitter, and then when you...
I really like these little intro edits that have been going up with Keppel's segmented portion, segmented pieces of the streams lately. It's really coherent. I don't know. I just felt like putting it that way.
you get called out on it, you end up walking it back, being like, "Oh, I was just exaggerating.
Wait,
I
I'm
was
sorry,
just rage baiting."
Yeah, of course we're gonna get some lovely buffering nonsense,
Bait.
aren't we? Ah, this is my life.
You want to get right into it then?
Okay, so I want to figure out what the context was in the first place. Why were you saying that people who say Theyfab should be killed with anvils?
Then anvil should spawn 30 feet above their head. That doesn't mean they should be.
We know what you mean by this.
Okay. I really dislike the term that like serves the express purpose of reminding a trans person of their sex. Right? Same way that you wouldn't refer to a trans woman who you disagree with as a she-mab, right? Like that feels like a fucked up thing to do. Hence why.
Okay, this is why I wanted to do a reaction to this on my own channel, because I should up the playback speed a bit. Usually that's fine. Because Karl Max does this constantly throughout this debate, which I say in dick quotes because it's not like, as far as debates go, it's pretty, you know, I thought it was pretty chill most of the way through. A bunch of people did, and but like it's it's something, isn't it? But where was I going with this? I had a thought, but it's, it seemed to end cordially, as a couple people, at least one other pun at the cat match, agreed with me on that. It seemed to end cordially, that people were, that both parties were, willing to just let it be at this. But it's like all of the discourse that came about, but like I think both of them made some good points and some really, really dumb points. I think it was just a thing that happened, but no, the thing that bothers me is, you'll notice Karl Max does this throughout this entire stream, is he refers to transgender people, or trans, thing that I've been going about for at least 4 years on YouTube at this point, that that people, and you especially see people who portray themselves as allies to trans people, you see them so often say trans women and trans masculine people, trans women and trans masks, trans women and Theyfabs, right? It's a creep. It's a sneaky way to ungender, essentially misgender trans men, and you see cis people do this all the time. I've been online long enough to see the terminology morph from trans feminine and trans masculine being like specific non-binary identities into morph into umbrella terms, which I've not really up on, but I prefer to like choose my battles for when I try to explain to people like how that doesn't necessarily make sense as umbrella phrasing, because I did a video on this a few years ago, and to now we're at a point where for the last 5 years you so often see a lot of times cis people say and trans masculine people, and that is just like where I don't think it ever should have become umbrella terms, because now it has come into this nonsense now. And where the hell is my link to throw this around at people? Edit destinations. Of course, this is gonna like oh, there we go. Let's do something that I wanted to. Nope, there we go. Copy, close the thing. Okay, bump that. And let's go back to this.
I think that Theyfab was really fucked up. For I feel like people who are using terms that have kind of the purpose of inducing dysphoria, maybe should have an anvil fall on them, maybe, occasionally.
Okay, so the first thing I would say on this is, how do you know that it's being used to induce dysphoria? In which context did you see the term being used?
Well, I mean, the term itself is dysphoria-inducing, is it not? I mean, for lots of people who don't want to be reminded of their, like, birth sex, right? Is that not, like, is that not directly kind of doing that? Being like, hey, reminder, you're different from the rest of everyone else, right?
Like, for some, but that's making the assumption that you're talking to someone who experiences dysphoria in the first place, and when that argument, like, used, it's usually being used to refer to non-binary people who aren't trans. They're not going through a medical transition. They don't feel dysphoria.
I've seen a lot of people getting on Kevels about this on Twitter. Like even at Capital Ranch, you see, I've seen a few people say. I mean, I definitely saw it during the live chat yesterday. Is asking, well, aren't non-binary people already trans? Whether they medically transition or not, and I say to people, and when people ask that, and I'm in a position where I can give an answer that is correct enough from my perspective, is I see a lot of. I mean, and I'm not even going to give a percentage, because I just say that I see it often enough that there are some, if not a relative lot of non-binary people who do not identify as trans as well, for whatever reason. Usually, because they're not medically transitioning, or at least that's what I've gathered anyway. But, I see it often enough that I think it does follow a logic that it's erring on the side of caution to say trans and non-binary people. Because not all non-binary people consider themselves trans for whatever reasons they may have for that. So but otherwise this is a not my circus, not my monkeys kind of thing. I'm just like, I am not part of that debate. All I can do is just like repeat what other people have said to me, or that I've noticed they've said, to others about their own situations. So I'm just gonna be like, whatever.
I think that reminding them of their birth sex when they identify as non-binary is still. I mean, you can call it non-binary phobic if you don't want to call it transphobic, but that's still a thing to do. And also the argument about dysphoria and if it's okay to then insult people because they're non-dysphoric or whatever is kind of bullshit, because every time I see that being invoked, it's against people who haven't made it clear if they do or don't experience dysphoria. It's mainly just used against people who are gender non-conforming and don't look like the gender that they're transitioning to according to like conventional societal standards.
See, I feel like you're missing like the core of this issue. The reason why people use it as an insult in the first place. Like, the only times I've seen people use the term Theyfab is when it was non-binary people who were assigned female at birth who were doing AFAB-only housing. Or the non-binary person who was assigned female at birth who was saying that my dog hates AMABs, which both of these...
I have no idea what Keffels is talking about with AFAB-only housing. My guess is like maybe college dorms, but somebody on Twitter, just like maybe 5 minutes before I started this stream, was saying something about like how oh gosh, what was their thing on Twitter? Son of a crap. Okay, so because I'm streaming from the laptop. Let's see. Okay, so somebody, Razor Sarp G96 says to Karl Max, about, I guess, like, Keffels dropped some Discord DMs, and I only saw this within the last hour or so. So Razor Sharp G96 responds to Karl Max. He made it sound like she was hurling slurs at you in DMs. This seems mundane from Keffels at best. Also, the using the term since 2012 line in the context here looks like BSing people do when they're done with a convo, which I can see that. I'm used to Keffels' sense of humor enough at this point that seems like a fair read to me. But I responded to Razor Sharp G96 saying, that was my takeaway. The only instance I can think of for why a trans woman might unironically call someone Theyfab in something similar to the final years of Michigan Women's Music Festival, v. Camp Trans. And, oh gosh, without getting too deep into the history there, because there's a lot I simply don't know, but, you're an LGBTQ person in this part of Michigan, you will have heard about them. You will be at least somewhat familiar, at least if you're over 30. Yeah, if you're like over 30 and you're in this part of Michigan and somehow LGBTQ, you have almost certainly heard of some amount of the discourse and drama surrounding the Michigan Women's Music Festival before it finally, I think they finally shut it down in like 2014. Let me check. But anyway, so when I say versus Camp Trans, there was, so Michigan Women's, and that's women with a Y. Oh, hey, WOMY immediately brings up Michigan Women's Music Festival. So let's see when, it ended in 2015. Okay. On privately owned woodland near Hartford Township. And yeah, there was a semi-public campgrounds like almost exactly across the way from Mishfest, and that's where Camp Trans was held, which I think that started in the late 90s. Exclusion controversy. In 1991, trans woman Nancy Jean Burkholder was asked to leave the festival. This was retroactively justified by the instatement of a Woman-born woman policy as named by Vogel. Vogel stated in 2013 that Mishfest was always intended for women who at birth were deemed female. The practical effect was that trans women were excluded from the festival, which became the subject of criticism. So Camp Trans did start around like 95, 96, and the so yeah, the thing the thing with that was, so clearly the intention for Camp Trans was to be this like parallel protest music festival, um, where trans women and AFAB allies were explicitly welcomed, in protest of Mishfest's AFAB only policy. And I say AFAB only policy because there is, oh my god, I really don't want to get into the history about this. I'm at Barnes and Noble. It's let's just say that at some point the discourse around their AFAB only policy involves a trans man who basically allowed trans women to be scapegoated for what he did. I'll probably give a local history talk on this after the cats and I move into our new apartment, which should be in a few weeks. I'm really hoping for that. I'm really pushing for a few weeks. So, anyway, so yeah, Camp Trans started explicitly by and for the explicit inclusion of trans women. That said, during the last few years of Camp Trans, I heard from so many trans women that it became Theyfab Fest, or Camp Theyfab was one term an old friend of mine explicitly called it. She called it Camp Theyfab at some point because, according to her anyway, I've never been to either fest for a number of reasons. Yeah, I'm not going to be at a Michigan Women's Music Festival because, well, as a gay man, that is not my place to be. But yeah, so yeah, like an old trans woman friend of mine once referred to Camp Trans as Camp Theyfab because, according to her, in the last few years of Camp Trans's existence, it became overwhelmingly dominated by AFAB, as in apparently female at birth, non-binary people who were not explicitly masculine, to put it in a way, I suppose. But yeah, like identified as non-binary, expressed on the feminine side, or fem side of androgynous area, I guess. So that is like, and I'm not saying that level of animosity towards AFAB non-binary people is a good thing, especially to express it in such a disparaging way. But I am saying that it does follow a certain logic that that I have some sympathies for, because this was this was something that was explicitly started with trans women in mind, and then it became dominated by people who, on first glance, most would assume to be cis women. Whether that's how they identified or not is another story, but they you can't you can't completely dismiss how a lot of trans women felt about that sort of thing as it was happening. So that's the kind of incidents where I see, like in the last 10 years or so, where I've seen trans women unironically refer to somebody as Theyfab, because, like I said, there is a reason for those feelings came from someplace very real, and you see trans women saying, "Hey, this was started by and for, our inclusion as trans women," right? And so to see it being gradually taken over in less than a decade, because remember, Camp Trans started in 1995, so by like 2011, 2012, even 2010, oh gosh, yeah, I think my friend did first utter Theyfab, Camp Theyfab to me in like late 2010, early 2011. It was just before Best X and I moved to Lansing. So it would have been as recent as June, no, July, January 2011. So it was probably like later in 2010 when she called it that to me. Needless to say, my friend was very bitter about the situation with Camp Trans at that time. So, like I said, I'm not saying it's good to express that kind of animosity in such a disparaging manner. I'm just saying that I understand where those feelings come from, you know, and you know, I think there are more constructive ways to work this through, but that like yeah, I do see this occasionally come up unironically from binarily identified trans women, um, and their feelings are valid. I just think there are far better ways to express it. You don't have to disparage non-binary people, um, and non-binary AFAB persons in specific to express those feelings, right?
Saying they're blatantly transphobic.
I mean, yeah, right, but that doesn't mean that you have then a right to try and go out of your way to remind somebody of their, like, birth sex for no reason. Why not just say that they're trans-misogynist or something, right? Like, there's just bioessentialism. Why not call them out for that rather than, like, going for an insult which, like, directly has the express purpose of trying to remind them of their birth sex?
Wait.
I think the reason why is that it is
Wait. Did he legit sound misogynistic in reference to
such a common pattern of behavior that people coined a term saying that my
Theyfab
dog
phrase?
hates AMABs, which both of these things are blatantly transphobic.
I mean,
the only times I've seen people use the term Theyfab is when it was non-binary people who were assigned female at birth who were doing AFAB only housing, or the non-binary person who was assigned female at birth who was saying that my dog hates AMABs, which both of these things are blatantly transphobic.
I mean, yeah, those things are retarded, right? But that doesn't mean that you have then a right to try and go out of your way to remind somebody of their, like, birth sex for no reason. Why not just say that they're trans-misogynist or something,
Okay,
right? Like,
okay, that's what he was talking about, trans-misogynist. Okay, so AFAB only housing, we're assuming student housing, so that would explicitly exclude trans women, and on AFAB non-binary people saying, my dog dislikes AMABs, so yeah, again, trans-misogynistic because we're assuming somebody on the trans-feminine side, okay, being spoken to by somebody on the trans-masculine side, so okay.
it's just bioessentialism. Why not call them out for that rather than, like, going for an insult which, like, directly has the express purpose of trying to remind them of their birth sex?
I think the reason why is that it is such a common pattern of behavior that people coined a term to reference it. And at the point when they're doing shit like that, I don't see why they deserve that respect.
Do you think that the majority of the times it's used is actually used like that? Like, because I don't know anybody who defines it the way that you are, and I also don't understand the point of insulting people who are even non-dysphoric, really, right?
And okay, this is where I can see like both Keffels and Carl have valid points here. That and it's like what I said with the Camp Trans situation, that Keffels brings up. That yes, these kind of feelings are coming from a very real place. That these are valid feelings coming from a real place, and he's also saying, well, you don't need to be disparaging in that way. Like, like I understand why Keffels thinks, she didn't do well in this conversation. That's really what it is. Because like I said, we're going to watch this all the way through because I think it did end cordially enough. And there are points where they do seem to, agree with each other a lot, but it's just like, they both said, true and based enough things, and they both said some pretty damn stupid things. So, here we go. And that stitch on this row.
Like, if that is the case, who gives a shit? Like, go after them and try and be like,
So
actually, you're not.
That's
valid,
why I asked.
right?
That's why I asked at the start of this. I was like, what was the context it was being used? Because like removing it from the context in which people are mad, I totally understand why it's a shitty term. But I feel like if you're talking about it in the context that I've seen it, it just feels like home policing a marginalized group expressing frustration at a common behavior that they see in other people.
Would you say it would be okay to call like a trans woman who's got annoying opinions on trans stuff a she-mab? Yeah.
How is that actually relevant to it?
Well, because it's a direct comparison. That would like apply to
It's not.
sort
I'm
of
asking
non-binary
what the
people.
context is in the first place.
There I go. There I go. That's what I'm talking about. So, okay, he is using, he says this is a direct comparison, calling trans women she-mab or versus calling non-binary Theyfab trans people, or otherwise non-binary Theyfab people trans or Theyfab. Like, like this is what I'm always going on about with like how it was a mistake for trans masculine and trans feminine to become umbrella terms, because now we're seeing, like I said just a few minutes ago, I have seen this shift over the last 15 years of, 15, 20 years ago, trans masculine, trans feminine, these were terms that were explicitly non-binary identities for people who identified, trans masculine, as like, AFAB, somehow trans but not quite men, trans feminine, AMAB, somehow trans but not quite women. So this was about like 20 to 15 years ago. That's where these terms were. About 15 to 10 years ago, I started seeing this shift into these becoming umbrella terms that includes, all AFAB and AMAB trans identities, including binarily trans men and trans women, respectively, including, the, most feminine presenting AFAB non-binary, and likewise with AMAB non-binary sorts, like where at that point, like these are terms that these are umbrella terms that are being used. Like when it's used as umbrella terms, these are too broad to be useful. These are too broad to be words that represent shared experiences, right? Other than simply not identifying with the gender assigned to oneself based on apparent sex at birth. So, because like by that logic, well, trans women and trans men should, be considered the same thing, right? It's like, yeah, like I can see how that would make sense to some people, but at the same time, the experiences are different enough that we need separate terminology in many cases. That there are times when broad terms are useful, but there are also times when it's absolutely um, uh, it's absolutely necessary to be specific, right? And I think I think using trans masculine and trans feminine as umbrella terms really try to be like as broad as possible, to the point where we're saying virtually nothing, right? It's not, these are terms that are not being used broadly enough to be useful, but because at that point, like, just say the transgender community, right? Like, just say the transgender community, because it's like, like there are going to be times when, I don't know, it's just it just feels like it's in these are terms when used as umbrellas are in this weird, in between state where it's like they are not broad enough to be useful, but also, but at that, but being used as umbrella terms, like they can't really be narrow enough to be useful either. And then in the last 5 years or so, like, give or take, I have seen an alarming number of cis people say shit like trans women and trans masculine people, trans women and trans masks, trans women and trans masculine people. No. When it gets to that point, it's no longer a useful phrase. When it gets to that point, it is just a sneaky way to ungender and misgender trans men. It really is. It really is at that point, because no, we have not reached a point in the English language where woman is shares a dichotomy with masculine, right? Like, because women can express themselves in a masculine manner. Therefore, that is not the dichotomy, because women can be masculine. Men can express themselves in a feminine manner. So that is not the dichotomy, because feminine men are a thing. So the dichotomy is woman, man, or masculine, or, woman, man, or masculine, feminine. But he's using this dichotomy of woman, masculine. Like, no, at that point, it is literally just misgendering trans men. It is literally a sneaky way to ungender and misgender trans men. And I think he doesn't even realize he's doing it. I think he really does mean well. I think he really does think he's doing and saying the right things here. But as they say on the internet, intent doesn't trump impact. And the impact of using this dichotomy of trans women and trans masculine people, well, the impact of that, like, the intent may be to, be affirming of trans women and be as inclusive as possible of not just trans men, but other Theyfab people who identify masculinely somehow. But that's again, like, that's not the dichotomy of those words. Right? It's like, that's not the dichotomy here that he's saying. He explicitly said trans masculine and versus trans women. He said that is the direct parallel. And in saying that, he just went and ungendered trans men as, little more than hyper masculine women. That's what he's saying. I don't think he realizes he said that, but that is exactly what he said.
Oh,
People are
sorry.
using it.
Well, I mean, I made that clear, right? The context of people using it in is to invalidate people who they perceive as non-dysphoric and to insult them.
No,
That's
I'm
how it
talking about a
is used
specific
90% of the time.
situation in which you've seen it being used. Like, when was someone called a Theyfab? What was the context that led you to say that in the first place?
Well, I've got several friends who are trans masks and have been insulted over not being gender conformed called Theyfabs.
See,
he even said that, this was trans masks. I don't care. Like, when he says that the direct parallel that he's drawing with this is calling trans women she-mab. No, that's, again, I don't think he knows he's doing this. He seems just that dumb. And I'm not saying that in a necessarily disparaging way. I mean, like, he's not thinking about what he's saying. He's just parroting back what he thinks he needs to say to be a good ally to trans people, which, okay, but that also means that, he doesn't, if he's just repeating what he's seen other people say, that's not good either.
I agree with you then.
Then why are you trying to debate me over this?
Why am I trying to debate
majority
you?
of
Because I've
majority
seen
of
people that I would describe as Theyfab, and I don't have
But
sympathy.
why would you describe them as that? Why not just use a different term which isn't like so inflammatory and also like so drenched in like transmed bullshit as well? Like, do you want to be like associated with that crowd?
No, I feel like it's weird to even say that I'm associated with that crowd when I made it pretty clear that I hate that crowd.
Yeah, but who else uses that term? Like, actually, like, I do not see. Literally,
I've seen a lot of
think
trans women use that term specifically to talk about their experiences of transphobia from people who are non-binary.
I don't see why they would have to use that term, or why would then be like, okay, well, that's all right. Is it? I mean, again, is it okay to use the like she-mab against a trans woman who's being
Are you
shitty
saying
to you, or has
she-map or
to
she-map? What is she-map?
she-mab? It's a
She-map?
direct. Yeah, it's a
I have
direct.
never heard this term before.
I know, I made it up. It's so you can
Wait,
see.
so
a
wait,
comparison.
so you just made this up for the point of an
Yeah,
argument?
it's like
See, that's the problem. It's like I don't think
that's not an argument, Cathals. If you have Theyfab, and you're saying that that's okay to do because it targets this group who you perceive to be invalid, why can't we flip that around and say that you could do the same thing to trans women?
Because I want to talk about actual arguments in the context in which these happen, and I don't want to talk about.
This is a hypothetical,
things.
though. It's a very valid comparison.
I don't think.
No, it's not a valid comparison because he's comparing the feelings of trans women who've had a very particular experience of having their womanhood being dismissed, and he's bringing up this hypothetical term that he says he just made up, which sounds an awful lot like another word that many trans women regard as a slur. Of course, that word itself goes back to the 1920s and was once a disparaging term for feminists, as in like cisgender women feminists. But that's another story for another time. And he's using it to draw a comparison to a particular type of Theyfab non-binary person that, as I went with the cab trans example, benefit from the exclusion of trans women. Like, and that's where I see like the valid reasons for certain feelings that a lot of trans women have toward AFAB non-binary people, especially those who, express themselves femininely or whatever, because, and I'm not saying they're correct in seeing it this way, but from where a lot of trans women, will see somebody in that position, they see it as kind of like this cake and eat it sort of thing where, let's call this person, just for the sake of simplicity, Meredith. That's a unisex name, right? Traditionally, anyway. Traditionally, Meredith is a unisex name. Like there's Meredith Burgess, the actor, the male actor, and a woman in the Meredith Baxter something. I don't know. But a woman named Meredith, right? Okay, so, there's Meredith. Meredith is AFAB. Meredith, I don't know, dresses like Susie Sue in the 80s. So quite feminine, but Meredith identifies as non-binary. Meredith prefers you refer to them as they, them. Okay, fine. I'm not going to say that Meredith does not have, some form of non-binary or even, what Meredith would consider a trans experience. I'm not going to say that, they don't have the experience they say they have. But then you get, let's call her Jane. Jane is a trans woman. Jane and Meredith both apply to the to the women's dorms on their college campus because they both go to University of Michigan for some reason. I don't know, because it's like right here, and I don't know how the U of M dorms work, but let's say that they both apply to the women's dorms. I don't know anything about the women's dorms at University of Michigan. I just know that they're that way. I just know that they're that way down Washington Avenue, right? Okay, so both Meredith and Jane, Meredith the AFAB non-binary feminine presenting person, and Jane the regularly feminine trans woman, they both apply to the women's dorms. Meredith gets into the dorms, but Jane is turned down, being told explicitly that, I'm sorry, these are AFAB dorms, not women's dorms. You want to go to the other dorm. But there were reasons that Jane applied to the one dorm that she's now getting turned down from as well. Like say all the other dorms were filled up or something, or that these AFAB only dorms are much closer to the majority of her classes or something like that, right? So now, from where Jane is sitting, Meredith is benefiting from a bioessentialist policy that benefits that is written for not only cisgender women but also trans men and non-binary AFAB persons, trans or otherwise. Now, most trans men probably won't apply to this dorm because they feel it would be misgendering by association, right? So, we see no trans men applying to this dorm this semester, right? But Jane sees a lot of people who, on first glance, if you don't already know these people well enough to know, their gender identity and pronouns, like, you can pass right by them and assume they are cisgender women. But at the same time, Jane then sees Meredith, the following week at the UMich Transgender Student Union meet and greet, because it's the first semester of the year, right? And Jane asks, well, hey, I saw you apply to that dorm that I wanted to get into, but I got turned down. What are you doing here? Are you also a trans woman? And Meredith says, no, I'm AFAB. I'm non-binary though. That's why I'm there. So again, it's like from where Jane sits, Meredith is benefiting from resources and social groups at the college campus designed to help trans people uplift each other and support each other, while also benefiting from this bioessentialist policy for the dorm that Jane really wanted to get into because, say, they're much closer to her classes. So, like I'm saying, I'm not saying that Jane would therefore be justified to continue to say disparagingly to Meredith, oh, you're just another Theyfab who's playing around until graduation. You're a tug, they until graduation, whatever. But I'm not saying that Jane would be correct in that. I'm not saying Jane would be in the right. I'm not saying it is good that Jane might do this. What I am saying is that Jane's feelings are coming from a very real place, and this needs to be somehow addressed so that it doesn't continue to happen, and this animosity isn't allowed to grow beyond Jane and affect other trans women in this way. Like,
I think it's valid. Like I asked at the very start of the
Wait, would you or would you not think it's okay to?
I asked at the very start of the conversation, context that made you say that. Was there a situation that came up? I
Every
feel like
time
right
it's
out
used,
gate.
it's been employed in a shit.
When did you see it used? That's what I was asking. I was trying to understand
like
the context.
several times with trans masc friends of mine, several times with arguing with trans meds, pretty much every time I've argued with trans meds, they've used it. I don't understand. I don't why not just tell people to use a different term which isn't set out to try and remind people of their assigned gender at birth? Why is that the approach here? Why is that necessary?
See,
what does that do?
in the context that you're mentioning it, I agree. That's shitty. But I don't think that it's okay to tone police people who are upset when it is very obvious that they're being targeted by a specific group.
Would it be okay
See, and that's where I also agree with Keffels, because as I said, Keffels basically said what I just did in a lot fewer words because she's had these conversations more often than I have. I'm not really an activist for trans people. I Yeah, I admit if I do a trans-related video on my channel, it's because I I could use some views. um, most of my videos are somehow monetized. I mean, not counting my radio show streams, um, but yeah, like this is these are feelings that are coming from a very real place. Um, I don't. I'm not saying that it's. Um, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's tone policing people who have, valid anger towards these policies. Um, I wouldn't say it's necessarily tone policing, but I would say that it is definitely not something for um, it's definitely not something for cis people to judge harshly um, when it does happen, because when it does happen, um, it's often coming from a very real experience, right?
A trans woman, a she-mab, if she was shitty about your gender.
It's missing the context.
This is a
no, it's missing the
basic
context.
comparison.
It's not a basic
what do you mean
comparison.
It's missing the context.
No, it's not
What more
okay.
context you need?
Call them. You just made up the term she-mab. It's just
Yeah, who
divorced
cares?
from the reality. Yeah, I care because
No,
it's
it's a
divorced from
direct
reality.
fucking. Wait, how do you not recognize how she-mab is analogous to Theyfab? It's literally analogous. It's literally how do you see that, right?
How is it analogous?
See, there he goes, and there's where I see where I can see why Keffels is asking why is it analogous, because the dichotomy is she versus he. That's the dichotomy in the English language. She versus he, not she versus they. Like like that's how it's not analogous, but I think she should have expressed that a lot better. That she should have said a lot more to explain how that is not analogous, and that's where she performed poorly here. Like, she has a point. I see the point. I'm pretty sure she would agree with what I'm saying, at least mostly agree with what I'm saying about it. That's the dichotomy in the English language of she v he, not she v they, right? That dichotomy is women v man, is women v man, not women v masculine. The dichotomy is masculine v feminine, not masculine v woman, right? Like this is where I see Keffels isn't performing very well, and how it's not so much a dumb point she has here, but it's a good point that she's expressing in a very dumb way, and this is why I think like creative writing and language arts should be necessary for people who want to get into activism. Like, you really need to have like some kind of language arts thing, because it does help with these situations.
Give me the context in which it's being used.
It's they, and the pronoun trans woman will be using is she. The assigned gender at birth is AFAB, and therefore theyfab. The assigned gender at birth for a trans woman is AMAB, and therefore she-mab, right? That's what it would then become, right? That's the comparison I'm making here.
The problem that I'm having with this is that she-mab doesn't mean anything.
What do you mean?
Because it's a term that you created.
Yeah, that's a dumb point. That's a dumb point. I mean, he is bringing up a hypothetical, so it does have a meaning that he assigns to it. No, it's not a very widespread meaning, but yeah, like that's a dumb point. This was not a good argument for Keffel's defense.
No, you literally just made it up.
Does Theyfab always exist?
It's been a term for a while. Like, there are definitely
Okay,
different
it wasn't
contexts
a
in
term
which
at
the
some
people
point,
use
right?
it.
I don't see how this matters. I don't see how this matters at all. Why can't you engage with a hypothetical? Why would it or would it not be okay to call it?
Because I think that the history of the term matters in the context of the discussion.
Okay, what history are we?
That's why because I feel like this conversation got way too aggressive right out of the gate when I was trying to ask the context. Like, I thought there was a situation that led to this, but it seems like there wasn't. And you were...
Every time I've seen that used, I do not see like people who are good faith and kind and actually not trying to like go in and invalidate someone's gender using that term. I don't understand in which argument it would be necessary to suddenly start trying to invalidate somebody's identity. Like, you can say so many things. You can insult people in so many ways. You can.
I don't think it's necessarily a a reflection of someone's relative potential kindness for them to express their feelings of having been somehow, unjustly treated as I don't think that's necessarily unkind, because even good and kind people will occasionally anyway say bad or unkind things. It's not a moral judgment on that. It's not a moral failing of them as people. It is it is simply reflective of them being human. So this is a dumb point on Carl's side, but I do agree with the underlying point that you know it is good, it is fine to express these feelings, just you don't have to shit on people when you express them, right? Like focus your anger at the right places. And with the example I gave with the dorm with Meredith and Shane, I believe, applying to the AFAB only dorm, the problem there is with the policy of that dorm. The problem is not necessarily with Meredith, though Meredith does benefit from this bioessentialist policy at that particular dorm, right? like it's it.
Explain in a billion different ways how they're stupid and wrong. I don't understand why you have to then bring their fucking assigned gender at birth into it. It just feels weird and fucked up and unnecessary.
I'll agree with you on that. I mean, I don't think that in the context I've seen the term used, it's fucked up, but it feels like it seems pretty fucked up in the way that you've described it being used. And I think that the problem is that we're coming from this from two different angles.
Can we? But I think that the way that I'm describing it being used is the standard way. If we look at like the Urban Dictionary definition, all of them are describing what I'm talking about. None of them are talking about the thing that you suggested. And I tuned in for a moment at the start of your stream where you defined it as like a non-binary AFAB person who's got like shitty views on trans stuff or something like that, right? Which is just not the case. It's just about
the only time I've ever
people
seen
who
it
perceive to
used
not be
is when
valid.
people. The only time I've ever seen it used is when trans women were venting about discriminatory behavior.
Dude, you have not seen like so much. Then there is every time I've seen like maybe not every time. 99% of the times I've seen that term used, it is with the express purpose of invalidating some non-binary.
So wait, was this about? Someone was suggesting. Was this
time.
about the now deleted Twitter thread about someone asking if a queer event was Theyfab or tranny being told it was a queer event?
Not really. I mean, that tweet is like that tweet's like neither here nor there. I thought it was like kind of stupid, and I feel like the terms there could be interchangeable with.
Oh wait,
like,
I'm on
trans, trans
I'm on Twitch. I just realized I'm also on Twitch. I can't say that. He's
oh,
my.
Oh wait, what can't we say?
We just said so.
It was the T word. It was the T slur. I didn't catch that the first time. When this was live yesterday.
So I'm gonna go ahead and delete that VOD.
Yeah. Okay.
Can we start this over? Because I honestly think that this got way too hot out of the gate, and I didn't expect this to be blood sports. And now I feel like
no, it's okay. I'm sorry. No, this is just.
I feel like I got put into a really defensive position when I didn't understand the context in the first place.
Yeah, I get you. No, this is also where I was confused. I don't see you as being someone who would really have odd opinions on this. So I do think it's genuinely just you not being informed about it. But I swear, if you look up the term on Twitter.
I'm actually gonna do that because I want to see if I'm.
I think you are. I think you're like misled on this. I get it, and I've seen trans women using it like that, but I think it's a term that they shouldn't be using either. I don't think anyone should be unnecessarily trying to remind everyone about their fucking assigned gender at birth, right? Like, why can't?
Okay, this is a dumb point as well, because all language used to describe trans people in any sort of way implicitly outs their, it implicitly outs their apparent sex at birth. It really does. That's what all language about trans people does. It implicitly describes their apparent sex at birth. So this is a dumb point. I've never understood why people do this. I've never understood why people make the argument of, oh, I don't like AFAB or AMAB words because, it just reminds trans people of their, of their apparent sex and assigned gender at birth. I'm like, so do the words trans women and trans men. It says you are a specific kind of woman or man who has this experience of having a gender that differs from the one associated with one's apparent sex at birth. That's what those words do. That's what those words all mean. Like, this is a terrible argument. This is an absolutely terrible argument. He should not be making it. Nobody with any sense should be making this argument. And that's not to say that all of the words around trans people, mean the same thing, basically. About, when being used, right? Like not all FTM originating terminology, nor all MTF originating terminology, all are interchangeable. Like there are contexts where some words are better to use than others, right? But all language around trans people, especially in English, because I'm not especially familiar with the language of with other languages, and the only other non-English language I am familiar with is Welsh, and there's not a lot of Welsh terms, at least that I'm aware of, that are by and about that are like about trans people, right? I don't know of a lot. One that I've kind of adopted for myself would be Mehiver Mahavr, which would be like equivalent to there's like an old rhyme, it's centuries old, Mehiver Mahavr Nid Bulchanda Anid Gavr, which loosely translates to Mehiver Mahavr, not a male goat, not a female goat. And I guess you could say that Mehiver Mahavr in English would be like equivalent to some of the more antiquated terms for intersex, I suppose. I know I really like that term. I use it for myself, often on Grindr, with alarming regularity, and I don't know. I'm sure people will have some thoughts about that, but yeah, like especially in English, like I'm not saying these words are all equivalent to each other, but there are contexts in which some of the words may be more appropriate than others, but yeah, like that's what all English words around the around unity do. Like they literally exist to say that trans people are not cis people. They are, we have these very specific experiences as men and women, respectfully, that differ from those of cis people. So
Just feel to avoid that. Even if you are venting, even if you are getting angry, it's basically kind of just transphobia to be like, actually, you're not actually you are just still your assigned gender at birth, right? Because that's what that's saying, isn't it? It's kind of reducing someone to that in a way, right?
One sec.
Sorry, no worries. I can try and find some examples as well, but if you just go on any like gender non-conforming or even just not super masculine trans account and you like look up tweets adding them with like Theyfab, I'm sure you'll find something like that. That it happens like all the fucking time to transmess. It like you and to like then enable the term when it is just kind of designed to cause dysphoria is like fucked up, right?
So I'm looking it up. You got me curious now. The first thing was you posting that you're debating me on this.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is
base?
someone saying Theyfab isn't a slur because they wouldn't get turned on if they got called it. And then a shit post, if you think Theyfab is a slur, maybe don't talk to trans women. People doing discourse about, yeah, this is not revealing anything right now. This would reveal more, but it didn't.
I'm not going to go ahead and like call out masculine trans masc. I know who you can look at like their experiences and you can talk to them, but I assure you that they have like dealt with a ton of shit using that term specifically. If you don't fucking believe me or whatever, that's the point of
every or as I said on the site chat yesterday, non-masculine masculine person, which just shows that this is not a good an umbrella term. It should have remained a specific non-binary identity, and that is as somebody who is AFAB, who identifies their gender as a masculine one, but does not identify as necessarily having a male gender, right? That's what it means. That's what it initially meant. That's what it should have continued to mean. It never should have become an umbrella term. Same goes for trans femme or trans feminine. These never should have become umbrella terms, because now we're in this nonsense where Karl Marx, a cisgender person, is saying to Keffels that that the dichotomy of trans people is trans masculine and trans women. Okay, then what about Ricky Wilchins? She's a masculine butch. She's also a trans woman. RIKKIWILCHENS, Ricky Wilchins. Like, Leslie Feinberg is a trans masculine icon. Leslie Feinberg was also an AFAB butch who, as recently as 2006, I believe, described herself as a transgender woman. But again, she's AFAB. Granted, her most active years as an activist were between like the late 70s through early noughts. So yeah, like she may have used some antiquated definitions for things, but no, like there's no way for like this is a term. Transmasculine is a term that literally includes people who identify as women. Like that's why it never should have become an umbrella term, because now we're in this shit where, sure.
Of using this term, and again, I am going to go back to the comparison I made before, and I really want you to answer this. Why would it be okay to call a trans woman a she-mab if she had shitty opinions on gender and fucking, I guess, was non-dysphoric or whatever the fuck? Would that be fine? Would that be okay? Or you perceive her to be non-dysphoric?
You can call me that if you want.
How the hell can I change the title?
Okay, would you be fine with other trans people, other people calling other trans women that?
See, I just don't want to even engage with the hypothetical because it's
come on.
I don't want to engage with the hypothetical because I want to talk about terms that are actually in use in the community.
That's such bullshit.
That's not
bullshit.
bullshit.
Why would you?
It's
That
not
is bullshit. It's
not
how is it not a fucking analogous argument? How is it not like directly comparable?
It's stupid. I don't want to engage.
How is it not
I
serving the
don't want to
exact
engage
same
with a
purpose that
hypothetical that you
Theyfab
just
is?
made up that has nothing to do with the community. Like I think that they.
What do you mean? I mean, how could it not be important?
Because obviously the answer is no, but we're not talking about that issue.
Obviously the answer is no. What? What do you
Obviously
mean?
the
No,
answer
it's
is
not okay
no.
to use.
Don't call trans.
You do that to fucking non-binary people. Why would that be okay then?
Why would that be okay? In the context that I saw it, I understand why people are frustrated. I don't think that
I mean, it's still practically
I feel like
misgendering,
tone
though, isn't
policing
it?
trans women is shitty. I
I
think
don't
that
give
they're
a
allowed
fuck.
to be
I think you should
frustrated.
tone police people who are practically misgendering all the time. Fuck that.
Misgendering all
say
the
that-
time. See, we're talking about different things entirely.
Okay, look, if you're going to reduce someone to their birth equivalent to gendering, I don't give a shit. You're saying that not
I
what
was
they
so expecting them
identify
to be
as.
more chill. I'm very confused.
It's frustrating.
Like I said, that is a really bad argument, because all transgender related terminology implies someone's birth sex. Like, it explicitly implies someone's birth sex. And I know that sounds like a juxtaposition. I know that sounds like an oxymoron there, but it's like it all explicitly implies someone's birth sex. That's what it does. That's literally what transgender language does. That's what it was designed to do. This is a bad argument, Carl. Which I'm not surprised that's why you fell for the trans woman v trans masculine being a dichotomy. No, that's just a sneaky way to ungender trans men. That is all that is a sneaky way for cis people like you to ungender trans men. That's all that is. When you say trans women and trans masculine people, and you say that this is a direct comparison, because no. And plus, like, when he's saying that this is a direct comparison because so many trans women are shitty to non-binary people, like, is he saying that there's no such thing as AMAB non-binary people? Like this is so many levels of transphobia that he's expressing that I don't think he realizes he's doing. I really don't think he realizes he's doing this, but he is. he very much is. Like this is why I understand the id pull argument of stay in your lane. This is why I understand the people who get all id pull shit and say stay in your lane, because this is something he clearly has not thought enough about to work out his arguments well. And he has not thought about this enough to work out good arguments because he is not directly affected by any of this. He is white knighting. He is white knighting for trans people as a cis man, and he is making very bad arguments because he is not affected by any of this. He is not directly affected by any of this. He is affected in the sense that he has empathetic reactions towards his friends and other AFAB non-binary acquaintances. And you know, he feels for these people, you know, when they feel they've been slighted in any way by other trans people. Okay, fair enough, but this does not affect him. This does not affect him, and he clearly has not thought enough about the arguments he chooses to make. And so now this is just like this is just impotent white knighting. This is just impotent white knighting. That is what he's doing. And I really thought that this long after the fact, rewatching, you know, that after rewatching it this long after the fact, this long after live, that I would have thought a little bit better of him. But like, I'm just like, no, honey, no, you're stupid. You're stupid. You're being stupid. You're acting stupid. I don't think you realize how stupid you're being. Like, just stay in your lane. Stay in your lane because you have not thought about this enough. You have not thought about this enough. You need to take a step back, and you need to get back in your lane. Just get back in your lane, Carl. Get back in your lane.
Because I just see it be used so in such an awful way.
I was asking you for the context in which you were used.
But I explained it, and you continue to defend it.
Didn't show me any context.
I mean, I can like fucking I can send you some stuff later, but I don't want to like put someone on blast here, you know.
No,
do you think I'm lying about it?
I don't think that you're. I don't think that you're. What?
Do you want to look through the Urban Dictionary definitions of it? Because I assure you, nobody's using it like the way that you think it's like used. So go on Urban Dictionary, look up Theyfab, and see what comes up. Because it's not.
Wait,
it's not describing. Huh?
How many trans women are you close friends with?
Plenty.
Tons.
Yeah, I've got lots of trans women friends. I'm a Volshite, and I like you know I'm very much. I know tons of trans people. I know it's okay. Like I would still tell someone.
You have trans friends, but it's very obvious that you don't get into these kinds of discussions with them enough, or at least when you do, they're not bringing up the right points to you to make good arguments. It's because you're not making good arguments, and you are talking to somebody, you know, Keffels, who is old enough to see, I don't know, maybe she did see like AFAB only dorms at her college in Canada. Like I said, my point of reference is old Mishfest Discourse from from like 10 years ago or so. From over 10 years ago. Like 15 years ago is when I started noticing the Mishfest Discourse. And if you're over 30 and you're in this area of Michigan, you have seen Mishfest Discourse. Like, you've definitely seen Mishfest Discourse if you're about my age, from about this part of Michigan. Seriously. Yeah, like there's a lot of AFAB non-binary people who, like I said, that they have this very cake and eat it, you know, relationship with the trans community. Like they will think nothing of, you know, like of going to various trans social groups, even if they are the non-transitioning type of non-binary. You know, like they just change their name and pronouns, for example. They still may express femininely, etc., etc., and that's fine. That's fine as a non-binary experience. I don't consider myself non-binary. I'm AFAB trans. I'm a trans man. I'm an effeminate trans man. I'm a femboy, or Nancy, as we were called back when I was a kid. Goddamn, Chris Chan has destroyed the internet so many ways. Samantha Lux used the term Tom Girl. this was never a term until Chris Chan. This was never a term until Chris Chan. Tomgirl was never a term until Chris Chan, roughly like 2009 or something, 2010, like just before Bob died. The term was Nancy. It was tomboys and Nancys, or no, tomboys and sissies, and then they grew up into butches and Nancys, or Nellies, depending on your part of the English-speaking world. Yeah, tomboys and sissies as kids, butches and Nancys, late teens through 20s. Oh, seriously? But no, this was the word tomgirl was never a thing until Chris Chan, and oh my god, I was speaking well of Chris Chan earlier today on Reddit. Compared to Daniel Larson, oh my god, Chris Chan is so functional compared to Daniel Larson. Like, you can really appreciate, like, in comparison, that Chris Chan has their shit together in comparison to Daniel Larson, which, yeah, that's a very low bar. That is an absurdly low bar to cross, but Daniel Larson cannot even shuffle over it. He cannot even shuffle around the bar to get past it. But yeah, whatever. It's like, ugh. And so, like I said, like, from where trans women are sitting, you know, there are some Theyfab, non-binary people who seem to present femininely, and, you know, from like where trans women are sitting, these are people who, for all intents and purposes, are treated and function as cisgender women in their local communities and most social situations outside of that. But, you know, and these are people who, you know, just for the nebulous definitions of non-binary and broadest brush transgender, you know, may identify that way, but also benefit from being allowed access to resources and spaces that are defined by bioessentialist measures and are thus intended for the benefit of cisgender women. So it's like I said, and that's why I see a lot of trans women kind of see this specific subset of non-binary people who get disparaged as Theyfab, which, like I said, I don't think you have to be a dick about it. But I can understand where those feelings are coming from.
Regardless of their gender identity, cis, trans, or otherwise, to not make an insult that harkens back to someone's assigned gender unnecessarily. I think that's just kind of like...
Wait, is this like trans?
It's kind of stepping too far.
Am I doing this? Is this like some weird trans incel shit that I'm just like unaware of? Is that why?
What are you talking about? Would it be okay?
Like, no, not you. Stop being defensive. Okay. I was asking if the term itself. I'm not trying to attack you.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I was asking if there's like context I'm missing here, because like I legit the only times I've seen this term used in tweets that get big, it's literally people who are.
Wait, you want to look at you know Cactus, right? The random piece of shit.
Cactus is a piece of shit.
Go on Cactus's account. Look up Theyfab.
Oh my god.
You think she's gonna be using it to vent about every like personal experience she's had being invalidated by a trans mask?
I feel like using Cactus specifically is bad because everything.
Look at any of her friends. Look at any of the like, general
trans
med community. Okay, yeah, but I'm using. Well, you wanted examples, right? Obviously, that's going to be a strong one. But if you look at any of the other people,
this got so confusing to me is that I thought that there was a context in which you tweeted it, like a greater discourse that was currently happening, and I thought.
I mean, it's just the term itself existing. Just why would we use that? Why have to invoke that? Why permit that and why defend that? What's the service? What does it do?
In the context in which you brought it up, I totally disagree with the term. Yeah.
Okay, but why? Okay, so do we have to keep on using the term then if that's how it's often or I would say primarily used? Would you not want to just maybe select different terms if you want to vent about a non-binary?
See, I think this is where the confusion came up, because you're saying that it's primarily used as a way to just attack non-binary people, and I think that the amount of times I've seen, I think that the amount of times I've seen it used has actually just been pretty limited, and in the situations the person was so shitty that I didn't feel like tone policing them on it.
Okay, so if someone's really shitty, we can just go after their identity regardless of what it is? Where's the line on that then?
Where's the line on that?
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you're saying it's okay to basically try and
Yeah, this is where I see why Kevel 6 chief may have performed poorly in this discussion on live was yeah, you shouldn't like make you shouldn't give room to being disparaging towards another person in a way that is focused on their gender identity, thus the term Theyfab. You shouldn't do that just because they're a shitty person. And it's not good optics to be willing to turn a blind eye to it because they're a shitty person. Yeah, you really need a better argument than that. You really do, and that's dumb point to Keppels, and again, and point to Carl, and negative point to Keppels, positive point to Carl on this one. This is that's not that's not a good argument. That's like no, like even just like I said, like even just optically, you shouldn't like give permission for that, because it just, like I said, even if we're only considering optics, giving permission to that just kind of makes you look like a shitty person by you know if only by association. I can Is that what I meant? I don't know, but it just kind of makes your argument look a little bit shittier. Um, because people will interpret that as, oh well, where's the line cross? Where do we draw the line in the sand then? How shitty does a person have to be before we can no longer give them the basic dignities of their gender identity, or and that associated with it. And that's why that's where Xander Hall is wrong about Chris Chan. Like, as I've said on r/Chris Chan Sonic Shoe, I am not going to die on the hill of using the preferred pronouns for Chris Chan. Yes, Chris does prefer to be called she, her. I'm not going to die on that hill, like defending her preferred pronouns to other people, because it's Chris Chan, and I know that admitting that I'm not willing to die on that hill is not going to be a good look to a lot of people, but I would rather, I think it just, even though I'm not willing to die on that hill, I will still, whenever necessary, and I say whenever necessary. I know that's not going to sound good to some people, because, sometimes you're just going on autopilot with, what other people are saying, and the utility of pronouns, as Hunter Avalon has pointed out a number of times, the utility of pronouns, is important. Pronouns are, it's polite to use somebody's preferred pronouns. I am a he. Please call me he when referring to me in discussion. But it's most of the time, I'm not going to be aware of the pronouns you're using for me if you're having some kind of discussion outside my line of sight, or earshot, or whatever. If you are talking about me to somebody else, that's most commonly going to use he, him for me, right? It is it benefits me only so much as it benefits it benefits me in that it recognizes my gender identity for you to say he, him when referring to me in a conversation about me for some reason with other people, right? But I'm going to be unaware of most of those conversations. So I'm not going to directly feel like, yes, you are dignifying my gender identity. All right, you know, um, but so yeah, every so often, especially with Chris Chan in specific, people are going on autopilot. I might slip up on the subreddit. I did not do that intentionally to be a dick to Chris, like most people who call Chris Chan he, him. They're doing it because they don't think, Chris, especially after what happened with Barb. A lot of people just don't think that it's good to validate Chris's gender identity as a trans woman. Okay, I understand the internal logic people are using there, but I still disagree. Like that's like no, because there's a lot of like cisgender women who may violate their mothers in similar enough ways. Um, let your mind wander. I'm sure you can figure out like how this would be possible, but it is technically possible. Like, would you suddenly call a cisgender woman who did certain things to her mother? Would you suddenly call her, him, or they because she violated her mother in that kind of way? No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. So I'm not going to do that to Chris Chan. Usually on the subreddit or whatever, like just because I don't feel like having the argument with people about like about it. Like I will avoid pronouns for Chris Chan. But if it's not going to be awkward, but if it's going to be awkward for me to continue to avoid pronouns for in a sentence about Chris, um, you know, default for Chris Chan has been she for a while for me because I don't like no it's not good, and how if they say that the how good a society is measured by how well that society treats the lowest people on the social ladder, um, then I think that the same a s the same kind of argument works for trans people, like how like the like it says something about us as individual trans people by how we talk about and otherwise treat those um, who are the most disparaged amongst amongst trans people. So it's like I can get a pretty good idea about how you feel about um, gender nonconformity amongst trans people by how you speak of Chris Chan. Like I can usually get a good idea on that. Um, so so yeah, like I said, I know Chris is not going to be the hill I'm willing to die on. It's definitely not after what about what definitely not after what she did to her mother. But I think it says a lot more about me as an individual trans person that, in spite of what she did to her mother, I'm still willing to validate her gender identity because, like, well, at the very least, there's the undercarriage incident. Like, no cis dude would do that to himself, but Chris Chan did it to herself. Like,
use an insult that's like could risk inducing dysphoria. What else can you say? How far can you go? Is this same thing true for other groups? Can you become a little bit racist if an ethnic minority is annoying enough? Like it feels like you're committing just like a degree of discrimination on the basis of someone being annoying.
Okay, Karl Marx says that he never compared to saying the N-word. That he never compared the word Theyfab to saying the N-word. But here's where Keffels is extrapolating that. At the very least, like, if he doesn't go any further from this is where she's extrapolating that. This is where she's saying that, Karl Marx compared the word Theyfab to saying the N-word. It's this segment right here, that little line he just said, about ethnic minorities and all that, because at the very least, like, what else could somebody infer from that? What else could somebody infer from that statement of his? Like, let's push it back just a few seconds.
Racist if an ethnic minority is annoying enough? Like,
yeah,
it feels like you're...
If somebody of an ethnic minority is annoying enough, like, where does it end? Where do the disparaging comments have to end, right? That's where Keffels was extrapolating that, that's what she was inferring from what he said. So no, like, he did kind of compare the word Theyfab to the big N hard R, and no, we are not talking nanners. I am totally reclaiming manners. Try and stop me, Thought Slime.
Permitting just like a degree of discrimination on the basis of someone being annoying and retarded, which I understand as an urge, but I think that's as a principle really
I feel
not
like
good.
if we're going to get into tone policing and woke scolding, it feels really weird to use the term retarded in the same conversation. Don't you agree?
I mean, I don't really care. I'm disabled. I can use that. I can say that if I want to say that.
Well, that would apply to yourself, but you were using it on other people.
Okay. I mean, I don't really see the issue here. I'm using it to describe something in a way that's very clear to me, and is commonly used that way among my peers. It's
But yeah,
very
I would
well known to be that.
I would agree with you. That's
You
why
said
I
you don't
use
see
the term
Theyfab
Theyfab.
used. Okay.
I never have.
So, I just okay, but okay. So if we agree Shemad is bad, can we agree that Theyfab is probably bad and unnecessary and avoidable?
Yeah.
Based.
There you
Okay.
go.
W. Then we shouldn't be. Then I should be fine to say I want people to have anvils fall in their head. I'm just saying I want
No,
it. Obviously, I'm not going to do it.
I mean, the fact that it's a term that comes from the trans community, and that you say that if someone uses this term, you will still think.
What do you
that's
mean?
really
There are
weird.
so many fucking awful terms that are born from the trans community, which are terrible to say. Why would you then be like, oh, that's holy came from fucking 4chan? Like, really? That's not an approach. I don't think.
So you think that a term that comes from a marginalized community that doesn't belong to you, you can be the arbiter of that community.
This
and
is some
those terms-
idpol bullshit.
How is that
This some
idpol bullshit?
Because there are plenty of trans people who agree with me. There are plenty of trans people who agree with me.
I get
who
it. You have
come
trans
be like,
friends.
actually,
I just don't understand how this like.
this is a weird optical move.
How is it a
feel
weird
like.
optical move?
It is a weird optical move. You're trying to attack me saying that I know people who agree with me because you're trying to imply that I don't know anybody who actually thinks this way. You're trying to imply that I haven't spoken to enough trans people to understand why it might be okay that this term gets used, aren't you?
I just don't know why you're being so defensive on this.
I'm not being. I'm being pretty straightforward, and you keep on dodging shit. I feel like I don't know. I mean,
Speed
did I
enough
not?
time.
Is it not like? I don't know. I mean, you agreed with me that we shouldn't use it, and yet, like this entire conversation, you've been defending it. Like, what's your actual position here? Is it not just so? Yeah, but we agree. It's a term that should be avoided, and we shouldn't use it. And if somebody is shitty to you,
I mean,
you
yeah,
should
in the
use
context in
other
which
terms
this
there are.
came up in the first place, you were saying that people who say this word deserve to.
Well, oh my god, it's a fucking tweet, Kaffles. Like, really?
Well, that was the
are you gonna-
context of the conversation.
Okay. I mean, I was making a joke about anvils falling on people's heads. Like, really. I was saying that I think it's annoying and shitty when people do that. Okay? I was putting in a creative and humorous way. I don't actually believe, shockingly, that people should have anvils fall on their head if they use a shitty term.
So how do I know when and when?
And I think I do agree with him there that, well, I agree with how he described his comment that got this all started up. He was being hyperbolic in a humorous way, referring to like the Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoons. And I think it's obvious that this was hyperbole because, at the same time, I can also see where, Keffels was extrapolating from that Carl was saying people should die if they unironically use this term. Because, that would be the logical conclusion of the of the anvil falling, such as in the Wile E. Coyote cartoons, but outside of cartoon reality, right?
When you aren't serious, if you say something and then it's a joke.
I'm sorry, do you read a tweet where I say every time someone uses the term Theyfab, an anvil should spawn in 30 meters above their head and go, oh no, they're gonna do it?
Well,
Like,
I mean,
really?
you could have just said that it's shitty and no one should say the term, but you specifically
Yeah,
said
everyone would
that.
love that. That would be really funny. That would do really well. That would do great on Twitter. Everyone loves when you make a blank statement and you don't, like, add anything to it.
Oh,
He does
so
have a
you were
point.
rage baiting.
I mean, no, I was making a point about how I'm annoyed by people who use that term, and I was doing so in a way I found funny. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, you can say I was rage baiting. I mean,
Yeah.
my tweets are generally kind of provocative, right? So people who disagree with me. If that's how you want to define it. But I was just saying my opinion, really.
Yeah, this is all like really. I don't even know where to go from here in the conversation. Hey, I think I misinterpreted where this was coming from. I thought there was a situation that was happening that provoked this, and you were subtweeting. I didn't know that it was
mean-
just a provocative tweet.
Well, no, it's an ongoing situation of that being used to discriminate against trans masks for ages. I would say that's a situation.
I've
It's just
never
not a
heard
very
the term,
specific one.
And see, I think that's the problem as well. The difference in our experience. I've never heard that term used to talk about trans.
Look, hey,
I would think that's
later,
incredibly shitty. That's why I was so confused.
I'm
when
really
immediately-
baffled by this. Look, later when you're done streaming, I will go through and I'll send you some examples from. Later, I can send you examples of people being called Theyfab in a derogatory manner solely for existing as a trans mask person. I can send you plenty of examples. I can send you tons upon tons. Okay, but I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to put people on fucking blast. But if you don't believe,
Solely for existing as a transmasc person, and yet he referred to the Urban Dictionary definitions earlier in this convo, and let's switch the the thing to wait, where do I do it? Dun, dun. There we go. Okay, let's switch to this one. There we go. Okay, let's switch to this one. And um, okay, okay, the Wiktionary definition, Theyfab, plural, Theyfabs, LGBT slang, derogatory, a non-binary person who was Earth, often one who does not change their physical appearance. And then we go down Urban Dictionary, Theyfab. So he's saying that, oh, I see this used against trans masks just for existing, using it ostensibly as an umbrella term, which, would necessarily not only people such as my binary trans men and the and gender non-conforming, you know, the with the feminine dichotomy, but also people who are explicitly women, such as Leslie Feinberg. But anyway, okay, term to mock AFAB non-binary people. Okay, or there's this one, the top definitions that I pointed out on Twitter. A term used by trans meds and true. Oh God, I don't want to get into that. Dysphoric woman LARPing as non-binary. The term is a combination of AFAB and commonly used women who identify as binary without changing their feminine appearance, and call out anyone who doesn't use non-dysphoric person that's transphobic and semi-often homophobic and is uncertain. That is just like so esoteric. I don't know what the hell they're going on about. Derogatory term for a non-transit, woman who identifies as non-binary, combination of pronouns they, them, and the term AFAB, assigned with apparently female at birth. Theyfab, a term used to mock those who identify as non-binary without changing their gender or position at all. They tend to be incredibly vocal about how they LGBTQ and consider anyone who doesn't use they, them, a trope, even if they are obviously a female. So yeah, like this is very specific to people who are regarded as not non-transitioning, right? Like that. Wait, what is this? Oh, wait, no. Wait. Oh, crap. Oh, crap. The whole, anyway. So, oh, wait. We didn't actually see those. yeah, he is wrong. Like even the dictionary, even the Urban Dictionary definitions that he points to say that he is incorrect in describing it that way. It is not a term that is being used to disparage trans masks in general just for existing. It's a term being used for, as I said earlier in the stream, for the examples I gave of hypothetical Meredith, the non-binary AFAB, um, AFAB AFAB non-binary person who dresses as Susie Sue, prefers they them, but doesn't feel dysphoric with she her, but may feel gender euphoric by being called she they or they them, versus Jane at the same college. They both applied to the AFAB dorms, but Jane is a trans woman and is rejected from the AFAB dorms. So, like now Jane is losing out because, this is the dorm that's closest to her classes, right? And even the Urban Dictionary definitions that he pointed to, that he directed Keffels to go look at, which I forgot to switch the tab over when we went to go look at those. Um, these, those definitions that he explicitly asked Keffels to look at, they all implied some, they all explicitly did some degree of, a non-binary AFAB person who essentially, looks and presents femininely. Like this is not for trans masks, even by even by what I normally see as like a definition, like such AFAB non-binary persons are generally not included under a trans masculine umbrella because they don't identify as masculine. And so, like, people will often explicitly say, "Oh, we're not necessarily including non-binary, AFAB persons who do not identify as masculine, because they're not identifying as having a masculine gender, right?" So he's directly contradicting himself. Like we just like let me get get those actual, what the hell? Let me see if I can urban okay, Urban Dictionary Theyfab. Oh, here's where I could have done that. Share this tab instead. Okay. So we come to actually look at AFAB non-binary. Okay, here we go. Non-dysphoric. LARPing is binary. Combination of it. Don't change their female or feminine appearance, I suppose. Non-dysphoric person, non-binary person. Um, 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 is this that one that was okay? Derogatory woman who identifies as non-binary, combination of they them, and the term AFAB, term used to girls who identify as non-binary without changing their gender presentation at all, by which we can extrapolate. With this entry, these people dress and present femininely. So, like, this is not, this is not transmasculine people in general. Like, he's directly contradicting himself when he directly said to Keffels, look at the Urban Dictionary. Like he's directly contradicting himself. This is not a good look. This is not good. This is not what you wanted to do to make your argument. Oh, hey, yeah, go back to this tab. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, I need to start backing up. Okay. You got me. Yeah, and this is where I've seen a few people on Twitter pointing out that this is about the difference in the way generations um, use certain slang or other informal vocabulary that you know this is where, hey, stop that, stop, that this is where they just started talking. There is a generational gap here, in the way he's using it versus how Kevels uses it and sees it used. That there we go. Um, ew, that's right. Okay. That, there does seem to be like this generational gap here, which just feels so weird because, oh shit, yeah, Kevels is like 15 years younger than me. But yeah, it's a thing. It happens. And I don't know. That's where I'm going to wrap up. Feel free to watch this after the fact. Um, as I like to end my streams, um, um, uh, uh, um, take good care of yourselves and have exactly the kind of day you deserve. Feel free to hit like, subscribe, all that fun shit. Go to my Ko-Fi to throw away good money on a piece of trash like myself. And bats and kisses, no star, Will.